The Paper Mario series was, for many Nintendo children growing up in the early 2000s, one of their first forays into the genre of turn-based RPGs. Being able to fully explore the Mushroom Kingdom with a colorful cast of characters and a multi-hour narrative was a fresh take on the Mario franchise, only seen once before with Super Mario RPG 4 years prior. This concept would be later improved upon with its sequel, Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, fleshing out both the partner system and its combat even further. With the announcement of Super Paper Mario, fans were wondering what improvements we'd see with this new entry in the series, only to find out that the newest sequel had done away with the established mechanics from the first two games. Needless to say, it was quite a surprising change, leading some to be disappointed with this latest entry. Now, Super Paper Mario is not an underrated game by any means. In fact, it went on to outsell both of its predecessors by a pretty significant margin. However, amongst fans of the Paper Mario series, Super Paper Mario is often considered to be inferior to its turn-based siblings due to its more simplistic style of gameplay and the watering down of the RPG mechanics the series was known for. So do these drastic changes to the series' winning formula hinder the overall experience of the game? Let's take a look. In a first for the Paper Mario series, the traditional turn-based combat of the first two games has been replaced. Instead, Super Paper Mario takes a more action platformer approach to its gameplay, with only some light RPG elements sprinkled in. Unfortunately, because of this change, the game loses a lot of the depth it once had with its combat system. Gone is the careful planning and build crafting that came with the turn-based battles, and instead we are left with jumping on enemies' heads. Again. While there are still items and partner abilities to use, for the majority of the time, the best course of action when fighting an enemy is to just jump on them, over and over again. This gameplay change not only leads to a more simplified experience, but also a more forgettable one. Turn-based battles, for better or for worse, take quite a bit of time to get through, meaning you're spending more time with the enemies you encounter as well as the locations you're fighting them in. The more time spent, the more these encounters get drilled into your memory. You're going to end up remembering a lot more of the encounters and as a result, the game itself. While Super Paper Mario has these fantastic looking bosses, you spend so little time with them due to the simplistic combat that they don't really get committed to your memory like many of the series' past boss fights do. What good is it to have an intricately designed encounter if the fight is ended in less than a minute from you just jumping on them repeatedly? Take for example the Chapter 7 boss. This boss has such a crazy design and is essentially Satan, but look how fast and easily he gets defeated. This is a late game boss, mind you, so to see such a cool looking enemy be dealt with so quickly feels like a waste, unfortunately. Another major shift from the previous games is Super Paper Mario's world design. Previously, the Paper Mario series utilized a large, interconnected world for the player to explore, not too dissimilar to how the Pokemon games are structured. In this game, however, the various areas in the game are split off into more linear, level-based stages. As a result of this, a lot of the exploration aspects of the series are sadly missing in this entry due to this change, with the game instead taking on the classic left-to-right level structure of the more traditional Mario titles. The way each chapter flowed together in the first two games made the world feel vast and organic. Being able to walk freely from one chapter location to the next gave a sense of adventure to not just the main locations in the game, but also the paths connecting them. In Super Paper Mario, however, each of the chapters are divided into their own separate worlds, existing in their own dimensions away from one another, with the only form of connection being the hub town of Flipside. This decision takes away a lot of that sense of adventure, as now you are simply moving from one door to the next, rather than traversing through various landscapes to reach your destination. Now, while there is a reason for this story-wise, I feel the method of reaching each of the chapters could have been handled a little differently in order to keep the movement from one chapter to the next more natural like the other two. One of the things the first two Paper Marios were best known for was their memorable cast of partner characters. This was one of the first times we got to team up with many of the different species in the Mushroom Kingdom, from Goombas to Koopas, Bobobs, Boos, and even Lakitus. No longer were these beings simply enemy types for Mario to stomp on, but actual characters with their own personalities and characteristics. The Thousand-Year Door expanded on this idea even more so, giving each of the party members Mario encounters unique and more detailed designs, and in some cases surprisingly deep backstories. Super Paper Mario takes a slightly weaker approach to its partner characters. This time the partners you recruit along your journey are ancient little creatures known as pixels. If you played the past two games, many of their powers will be pretty familiar to you, with most of them being abilities from both Mario and his companions from those titles, while also throwing in a couple of new ones as well. Where they don't compare sadly is their personalities, or lack thereof. Outside of their initial introductions, the pixels never speak to you throughout the entirety of the game, making them feel more like tools for the player to progress rather than actual companions. But hey, at least this game has partners. What Super Paper Mario lacks in having memorable partners, it does make up for it with its number of playable characters. No longer are you confined to only playing as Mario, but now you have Peach, Bowser, and Luigi joining the adventure as well. Each character has their own unique abilities, which helps to keep the exploration fresh by having you swap between them to solve puzzles and to overcome various obstacles. Unlike the pixels, our heroes will give their own responses to what is happening during any given chapter, with each of the characters having their own thoughts on what is being told to them, making each person's playthrough slightly different from one another in that regard, as you end up catching a funny or interesting line of dialogue that others may have missed out on. While in theory it may sound nice to be able to play as whichever character you want, the reality is, for the majority of the time, you're going to be relegated to using Mario for exploration and Bowser for battles. You see, Mario's unique ability is one of the main mechanics that the game is probably best known for: flipping. Flipping allows Mario to change the perspective of the world from 2D to 3D, opening up new routes and uncovering plenty of secrets hidden throughout the world. Due to how ingrained this mechanic is to the core gameplay, you're going to want to have Mario as your active character for most of the game, as you'll need him to flip in order to not miss out on a lot of the game. When you're not playing as Mario, you'll most likely be playing as Bowser because, well, he's pretty busted. This is due to the fact that Bowser deals double the damage of our other heroes. If you're not using Bowser on any of the boss and mini-boss fights, you're actively hindering your damage output. Bowser is even further empowered when paired with the Pixel Carry, as she negates his slow movement speed. There are thankfully some encounters where this strategy isn't as effective, allowing you to use one of the other playable characters instead, but overall, if you want every fight to be a complete joke, just play as Bowser. While there may be some slight balancing issues with our heroes, it still is nice to see Peach, Bowser, and Luigi in a more active role for the game. But what would our heroes be without the villains? One of the aspects that the Mario RPG games have always done a great job with is its villains. Instead of simply relying on the overdone Bowser as the main villain trope, we get a weaponized blacksmith, a voice-stealing witch and her deranged little sidekick, an alien race of mushroom people, a dictatorship from the moon, and so on. Super Paper Mario is no exception, sporting quite possibly the best written cast of villains in the Mario franchise. For Super Paper Mario, our main cast of villains include the utterly dripped out Count Bleck, his faithful mind-controlling secretary Nastasia, the lovably goofy and Scottish Chunks, the this is an E-rated game somehow shapeshifter Mimi, and the always scheming man of magic Dementio. Whenever one of these baddies show up, you know you're in for some great dialogue, especially when they get into arguments with our heroes. The game knows exactly how much to use each and every one of its antagonists, striking a good balance on the number of encounters with them throughout each of the chapters. In between chapters, we also get a brief interlude showing our villains discussing what has happened so far. These banters help to give an inside look at what each of the bad guys think of one another and the events that are transpiring in the game. Watching them play off one another is always fun and makes these scenes feel like a little reward for clearing each chapter, while also adding further development to their characters. Out of all the Mario RPGs, I'd say Super Paper Mario gives its villains the most screen time, resulting in them feeling more like central characters to the story, rather than obstacles for the heroes to overcome. Count Bleck himself is one of the more complex villains in a Mario game to date. At first he seems like your average destroy-the-universe type bad guy, but as the game progresses, more and more gets revealed about his history and motivations, becoming more of a tragic figure rather than over-the-top evil. Him, along with his loyal servants, have certainly earned the right to cement themselves as iconic antagonists in Mario's Rogues Gallery. Along with its main villains, the NPCs you encounter throughout the game also continue to be as fun and creative as ever. You know, before every NPC in the series devolved into Toad, 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 Toad. Toad with a hat? Super Paper Mario manages to throw in a nice variety of interactable characters, despite the more level-based structure that help to distinguish each chapter apart. Despite its more linear nature, Super Paper Mario still manages to have some of the most creative locations seen in the series so far. I gotta give the devs credit for coming up with rarely utilized and sometimes bizarre locales, especially for a Mario game. For example, we have a pseudo-pixelated castle filled with robo-cat maids, a massive fighting tournament held in a feudal Japan-inspired world, hell, and many more places to discover during your playthrough. These locations are filled with a ton of puzzles to solve, as well as some fun callbacks thrown in here and there. While I do think there may be one too many picador style mazes and a bit too much required backtracking, as a whole you're guaranteed to run into some clever obstacles while navigating these worlds. Except this room. Why did they do this? Even though the game may lack the depth of the first two in terms of its combat and RPG mechanics, Super Paper Mario more than makes up for it with its absurd amount of gameplay variety. One minute you'll be progressing through a chapter as you normally would, and then the next minute you'll be in a space shoot-'em-up or fighting a mini-boss in an Earthbound-esque RPG battle, or even taking part in a dating sim. Yeah, dating sim. I couldn't even make that up if I tried. These twists in the formula help to prevent the more standard moments of the game from getting too stale. Easily the best aspect of Super Paper Mario, and what truly elevates it to being a great game, is its writing, and the story it conveys to the player. The Mario RPG series are no stranger when it comes to humorous writing, and Super Paper Mario is no exception. This game is constantly throwing jokes at you, and the vast majority of them are great. From clever and witty to as dumb as can be, this game won't fail at making you crack up throughout your playthrough. As funny as the game is, Super Paper Mario knows when to have its more grounded and serious moments too, not shying away from its darker themes. Past Mario RPGs, Thousand Year Door especially, have certainly had their share of morbid aspects to it, but Super Paper Mario takes its dark themes to a new level. There are some pretty grim parts in the game, with death and destruction of entire worlds, as well as some, honestly, heavy topics that are also discussed, dealing with loss and personal identity. The game isn't afraid to get deep with its themes, and that directness with the player helps to cement itself into the memories of those who played it. Even later on, when you may forget about the more gameplay-oriented aspects of the game, those quieter, more impactful moments are sure to stick with you for years to come. Super Paper Mario is a large departure from the turn-based RPGs we all know and love, but that doesn't mean that it can't stand on its own. Yes, it lacks a lot of the depth of those two games, and the more linear navigation can be a bit tedious at times. But what the game doesn't lack is heart. Is it better or worse than the other two? To be honest, I don't think it can really be compared to them. It isn't like the last two Paper Mario titles, nor is it trying to be them. It's its own game, and if you're able to see it for what it is, and not for what it could have been, you won't regret giving it a second chance.